Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I just want to be able to, again, welcome back the Brooks. It was a lonely month without all of you here. And it feels like we're whole again, that we have everyone who's supposed to be here. And so, well, we're missing the Grams now, but we'll trade off once they come back. So lately, Virginia and I have both, whether as a couple or independently, we've been encountering a lot of people who have been hurting. And this is not a pain that comes from disease, and it's not a pain that comes from injury, and it's not a pain that comes from just hurting yourself, but it's a pain that we've been seeing that stems from relationship. And this pain stems, whether it comes from the lack of love, it comes from the lack of healthy boundaries, lack of depth, or just lack of relationship entirely. It comes from bad relationships. And we've been seeing that in people that we know. We've been encountering that in people, certain pains that you see that are just unique to relationship, and there is pain there. And so what I want to speak on today is what you see in my message title, is the power of relationship. And I also want to show and give everyone just information on what to look for in quality relationship. And so what I'm going to be giving you today are three major pillars that I've found to be true in all relationships of any form of substance and any form of quality. And a fourth pillar that is more applicable to Christian relationships. But before I get into that, I just want to talk about just a few things to keep in mind when we think about relationship, when we think about interacting with people that we've known for years, people that we're just encountering, whatever it might be, just things to keep in mind when we look at relationship. And that is, one, for everything, the heart of all ministry, of all evangelizing, of all discipleship, of all counseling, of all reconciliation, whatever it might be, it all stems back to relationship. That's the heart of all ministry, no matter what we do, no matter who we encounter. It all points back to that. And all ministry points back to God, points back to Christ, who is the head of the church and the one who is the leader of all ministry. And we know that Christ is a God of relationship. He has never been in isolation for all of existence, and he has existed forever. He is outside of time. He has always been in a perfect, harmonious, loving relationship within the Trinity. There is relationship there. He has intended for us to be in that. He's intended for humanity to be in relationship with him and with one another. And that's what he wants all of us to encourage. He wants all of us to foster that. He wants all of us to have that with one another. And we all here today, we are called to be ambassadors for Christ. We're ambassadors for his relationship that he wants with all of us, and that he wants for one another. He wants to see his children in harmony with one another. For anyone who's a parent here, I'm pretty sure you're happiest when you see your kids getting along, whether they're kids or they're grown kids, whatever you want to call a 60-year-old kid. They're still your kids, no matter how old you get. And not being a parent yet, I imagine, that brings joy to a parent. I mean, it brings joy to me when I think of myself in relationship with my brothers, Aaron and Andrew, to see us in harmony all together. There's no better feeling than to be in quality relationship. And so when we go into relationship, another thing to be considered is that in itself, whether inadvertently or on purpose, is a ministry, being in relationship with someone. And I think that there's a misconception about relational ministry, is that, or actually maybe just ministry as a whole, is that ministry, no matter how small, is no less important nor impactful might see a church like Foursquare doing something where they're having some, or like a Billy Graham crusade when those were super popular. I remember going to that when I was like 13 or something at the Rose Bowl. And even if you're not a Billy Graham, where you hold like a tens of thousand people kind of crusade, even if it's just one person you spent your entire life knowing and loving, that's no less important than that Billy Graham crusade of hosting 10,000 people, leading them to Christ. They're just as important because they're all in service of Christ, the leader of all ministry. We don't take the glory, we don't take anything. We all lift it up to him. And so the last thing that I want to look at before going into this is something that I've talked about a lot with Regina, and something that I've noticed in a lot of relationship is that they require two key elements. And a lot of things in life require these two key elements, and that's being willing and being desirous of whatever you're doing. And in talking about it with her and observing that in people that we know, seeing a lack of one leads to something ugly, where we know a couple who goes to marriage counseling, and the husband is willing to go. But at least from how we can see things, he's not that desirous of being there, and so he doesn't put in much work. He doesn't do much outside of just go. He doesn't desire to see their marriage get better. And so he has the willingness, but he's not desirous of a healthy marriage. And on the flip side, seeing someone who is desirous but unwilling, someone else who is, and I think this is very common, actually, it's not specific to this one person, I think it's a lot of people, this person is desirous of a relationship, a romantic relationship. This person wants to be in a relationship so bad, and the term that millennials use nowadays is thirsty. He's very thirsty for a relationship. It's like a thirst for water. You just want it so bad. And this person is so desirous, they want it so bad. They talk about it all the time, and they're so desirous of it. But they're unwilling to do the things that you need to do to be in good romantic relationship. They're unwilling to change themselves. They're unwilling to be less selfish. They're unwilling to do a whole host of things. And so you need to be willing and desirous if you want to see any change, any growth in relationship. And so the verse that I'll be looking at today is found in 1 Thessalonians 2, verse 1 through 12. You don't have to go there just yet. But the context for this is Paul. This is written around 550 AD, and so it's not too long, relatively speaking, to after Christ was crucified. And so he is not a distant memory. He's not someone who's all like, oh, I heard about him from like my great-grandfather. Like, I never met him, and we have this like Bible that was written, but I never encountered him. No, it was still fresh in people's minds. And so in the book of 1 Thessalonians, Paul had already taken 2 mission trips over and established the church in Thessalonica. And by this time, which is very common when we see churches being planted in the Bible, that they were antagonized by people. In this case, they're antagonized by Jews who wanted to just tear this church down. They wanted to have their own religion poured in, and they just wanted to take over that church. And it's not an uncommon thing we see in Bible times or today. There's still people who want to antagonize the church, and so they were getting antagonized, and it was recently planted by Paul. And so Paul was sending this letter to support them. He was sending this letter to them to encourage them, to exhort them, and say like, hey, this is where you guys stand. This is what we believe. This is what when I established this church, it was on these tenets. It was on this foundation, and this is what you guys need to focus your attention on. It's like, ignore all the weird stuff that those Jews are just trying to throw in and confuse you with. This is the God that we serve. This is who he is. This is what he looks like. And spills out, or he lays out like doctrine and a whole bunch of things. And that's what the main purpose of this entire uh, book, First Thessalonians, was to support them, to encourage this church. And so, before writing this, when he was in Thessalonica, he spent weeks there. He wasn't just some magical white dude who stepped down there and just like poured some money and was like, okay guys, here's the church. No, he spent weeks with these people. He spent a good amount of time living with them, working with them, toiling with them, and building this church up, building leaders up within the church so that they can be self-sustaining, so that he doesn't have to be there. He doesn't have to be the pastor there. He was training people. He was equipping them so that they could have their own church in their own context. And that's what Paul did prior to writing this letter. He had established relationship there. And so when we start this off in 1 Thessalonians 2, verse 1, we'll see a few things. And so he opens up by saying, and also one other thing, throughout the greeting, you'll find that Paul says the phrase, you know, a handful of times. I don't know, whatever translation you use may or may not show it, but he used the phrase, you know, a handful of times, and that's to establish the fact that there's already a preceding relationship there. It's like if I were talking to someone like Stephen, I'd be like, you know how I already do these kind of things, and when we spent that time over there, as you already know, kind of conversation, it's like, oh, you already know all this, but I just want to say, just to refer back to this, the fact that you already know that we already have a relationship. And he stresses that at the start, where he says, you know, brothers and sisters, that our visit to you was not without results. It was an effective time that he spent in Thessalonica. He established the church. There were results, absolutely. We had previously suffered and been treated outrageously in Philippi, as you know. But with the help of our God, we dare to tell you his gospel in the face of strong oppression. For the appeal we make does not spring from error or impure motives, nor are we trying to trick you. On the contrary, we speak as those approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel. We are not trying to please people, but God, who tests our hearts. And so we're going to stop there for a moment. And with that section, I want to go into the first pillar that I was speaking of when it comes to quality relationships, the things that I really want us to take away from this sermon today. And the first thing that we find in quality relationship, and the first thing that Paul demonstrates in the few sections that I read through is, and it sounds redundant to say this, but he showcases personal relationship. And that's the first major one of quality relationships, is personal relationships. And what I mean by that is not a functional relationship. I have a functional relationship with my plumber. I have a functional relationship with the people who live at my apartment, who I'm the manager of. I have a functional relationship with them. They come to me, we're pleasant to each other, and I do what they need to get done in their apartment. It's functional. It works. It's not a professional relationship. Like I said, I have a functional and professional relationship with plumbers. I have a professional relationship with various vendors I encounter at my apartment. I have a professional relationship with my boss, Tom Cole, at the place that I apartment manage. Stevie knows Tom Cole. He loves him. This isn't a personal relationship. Also, is not an academic one. I've had academic relationships where I took hard classes in college, and I was friends with someone for a period just because we're going through something together, and then after that, went our own ways. No hard feelings, but we're just there for a season. And it's not a fair weather. I'm sure everyone knows that one. A fair weather relationship where it's all like, we'll only talk when things are really good in both of our lives, but if anything gets heavy, our relationship can't really sustain that, and so I'll go to someone else for help. And so it's a personal relationship, and that means that we encounter people where they're at in their life. And when I say that, I mean it's not just, hey, I'm a pastor, and so come meet me at what it means to be a pastor. But rather, if someone is low on income and someone is struggling to find a job and someone is struggling with depression and someone is hurting because of their abusive father and someone is doing a whole bunch of messed up things in your life, you encounter them wherever they're at, just as Christ does. For us, he doesn't expect us to be this perfect, quote-unquote, perfect son or daughter. He meets us in our mess. And we meet people in their mess. And they meet us in our mess because it's presumptuous and arrogant for us to think that we have everything together. There's not one person here who could raise, myself included, who could raise their hand and say, like, I got everything together, I got no problems. I'm sure we all want to be at that place where we have no problems, everything's easy, I can just go on vacation all day, and even in that would present its own problem, being on vacation all the time. But none of us have it together, and so we encounter each other wherever we're at in our life. We encounter without judgment, because we don't know their context, and they don't know our context for why we have an addiction to something, or why we struggle with something, or why we are more sensitive around certain things. We don't know that. And so we encounter them wherever they're at. And we have a personal, real relationship. Not just one where it's all like, oh, hey, how are you? Good, okay, I'll see you in a month. We need to know what's going on in their life. And we see this all in the first section that I read through in 1 Thessalonians, where Paul spoke of the relationship that he had with this church when he speaks of just that he went to them, and the fact that in his letter he's able to say, you already know, even that in itself is something that shows a preceding relationship. And when we look at Christ, and we look at his example for a relationship, we see varying degrees within his life. We see in Luke 10, don't have to go there, but we see in Luke 10 Christ when he appointed the 72 to go out and to make disciples, will make disciples. And then 72 is like, when I think of it, that's the size of a decent church. And in a decent church, you'll have personal relationships, but you can't know everyone on a very deep level. And so when we go down deeper, we know that Christ then had his 12 apostles that were much closer to him. It was a much smaller group. A small group that's around the size, the limit of a small group size, 12, give or take. And then when we go down another level, we know the three that were especially close to him, James, John, and Peter. These are the people who were with him when he was up in the Mountain of Transfiguration. They were with him when he was in the house when he raised up the little girl. They were with him in the Garden of Gethsemane. Those are all very tender, intimate moments that you're not going to share with everyone. And for whatever reason, Jesus was with these people during those tender moments. And so it goes to show the varying levels of relationship that even Christ had in his human life here. And the reality is, even for Christ, as he was 100% God, and he was also 100% man, in that 100% man, he was limited. He couldn't be everywhere all at the same time. He just physically couldn't, because he was human. He's 100% God, and God the Father could be everywhere at all times, but at that point in time, when Christ was on this planet, he could only be in certain places at certain times. He couldn't multiply himself, like it was Doctor Strange, for those that have seen that movie, probably just like two. He couldn't do that, and so he was limited in his time, he was limited in his space, he was limited in his physicality, where he got tired. There are lots of times we see in Scripture where Christ would escape away, he'd run and just seclude himself and just pray and just be alone. He had his limits as a human. And so we see varying relationship levels. And just as Christ couldn't do it with that 72, we know he couldn't have had a super deep, intimate relationship with every single one based on his physicality being human. We can't either. The pastor, Pastor Burmy, myself, Steve, John, we are unable to have exceedingly deep relationships with everyone. No pastor is able to do that, and that's a part of it, because it is our responsibility as members of this family to interact with each other, to love each other, to be in personal relationship with one another. And even though it's less common nowadays, I think it was Mr. Crawford, I remember, that he'd come from a home that had like 14 kids. I think it was 14. 15. 15. That is a church right there. That is a big home right there. And when I think of assuming like all of those kids were alive today, I'm like, even that in your family unit, you could not make the time to be with every single one and grow especially deep in relationship with every single one, even over years. It would take lifetimes to be able to know someone to that depth, which is crazy. That just doesn't happen anymore. Family of 15. Anyway, moving forward from personal relationship, that being the first pillar. Moving on in this scripture in 1 Thessalonians, now going from verse 5. Paul says, "You know, we never used flattery, nor did we put on a mask to cover up greed. God is our witness. We were not looking for praise from people, not from you or anyone else, even though as apostles of Christ, we could have asserted our authority. Instead, we were like young children among you. Just as a nursing mother cares for her children, so we cared for you. Because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well." And so as I stop right there, the second major pillar that is found in quality relationship, or a word to describe it, is deepening. A deepening relationship. And I don't use the word deep, because the word deep implies that there is a destination, that there is a place that you're getting to. And in any relationship, there is no destination. When you think of getting married, or when you think of like having a friend or a best friend, it's not like, okay, once my best friend shares with me the darkest secret, I'm out. I got everything I wanted from them, and I want nothing to do with them. Then I can write a book about this, become rich, and I'm good to go. No, that's not how relationships work. Relationships are continually, perpetually deepening. Every single day you spend with someone. If you think of how well you knew your brother or your sister when you were teenagers compared to how well you know them now, it's like night and day. Completely different, because during that time there have been hardships, there's been heartbreak, there have been just things that push them to the limit, that push your relationship to the limit. But in that you grow in love, you grow in grace, you grow in patience, you grow together. You influence one another in that. And so we see in Galatians 6:2, "Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfills the law of Christ." We are called to bear one another's burdens. And as we deepen those relationships, that becomes a part of it, because we care what's going on in someone's life. It is impossible to get closer to someone without caring what's happening to them, without caring when they're hurting, without caring when they need you, when they need help. And so that's the second part of a quality relationship, is that there's growth to it, is that it is continually deepening, that it doesn't stay at a surface level where it's all like, oh, I, Anthony, encounter someone who really likes board games, and that's it. That's all we talk about. I don't care about their family. I don't care what's going on in their life. They came to my house crying one day, and I was all like, I don't want to hear it. I just want to talk about board games. That's it. No, that's not it. We can't do that. That's not how relationships work. And so as long as a relationship is deepening, it's growing, and that's a good thing. There is no destination we're looking for, but we want to see our relationships growing. And we don't need to idolize that word either. One thing that I always wish to do, and one thing I find myself doing a lot, is trying to normalize things, because it's unfortunate that when things are spoken from the pulpit or spoken from someone in leadership, they seem possibly grander than they are, when they're not grand. And they shouldn't be treated as grand. And that's one thing that I personally, in the ministry that I'm entering into, really like to showcase, is that we're regular. Pastor Berkeley's just a regular guy. Steve is just a regular guy. We're all just regular people with our own faults, with our own limits, with our own hesitations, our own hopes, dreams, aspirations, all of those things. And so, in deepening relationship, I don't want that to be thought of as this grand thing where it's like, oh, I have to have this curriculum when I see this person, and I have to get ready to do X, Y, and Z every time I see him. If they don't leave my house crying in some way, it wasn't a good meeting with them. No, that's not what I'm going for. Deepening in relationship could look like going and getting McDonald's one day and just hearing about their day. Death doesn't mean we're plunging down leagues into their life. It's just one step at a time. It's one day at a time with whoever you're encountering. And so we see that in the section that I just went through in 1 Thessalonians, where we see Paul wasn't looking to have superficial relationships with this church, with the leaders, with the people that he founded this church with. He wasn't looking just for flattery. As he opens up, he says, we never use flattery. It's a very good thing to use in superficial relationships, in professional relationships. Flattery is often used. But as you grow deeper and deeper, one thing guys do a lot is we jokingly insult each other. That's something guys do, and you find that when you don't know someone, you're not comfortable to do that. But when you know someone and you love them, you can poke fun at them at times. And it's enjoyable because you know that this person is comfortable enough to poke fun at me, and vice versa. And so Paul says that they never use flattery, nor do they put a mask to cover up greed. He wasn't dishonest in his intentions. As God, as his witness, he wasn't looking for praise from these people. He wasn't just looking to be the all-know, the end-all, be-all person that comes in and is like, I'm going to establish this church and just pretty much praise me because I know exactly what I'm doing. I am Paul. I can do no wrong. He didn't come in with this mentality. In verse 7, I enjoy it, where he says, instead we came to you like young children, and in ways he came to learn from them in various ways, because he doesn't know their context. It's as if I were to go to China. I do not know the culture at all. I don't know the context if I went to a specific city or a specific place in like Shanghai. I know very little, and so in certain ways I have to go as a child. I have to be willing to learn. I have to be open to corrections if I'm doing something wrong. And so Paul goes in with a good heart, one that of a child, and at the same time he says, just as a nursing mother cares for her children. And he says right after in verse 8, so we care for you because we loved you so much. You don't care for someone that you just encountered. You might care for them on a superficial level, like, oh, I hope they do okay. But you don't know what's going on in their life, and so you can't care entirely about all the things that are plaguing them, all the things that are hurting them. And then right after that, he says, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. He didn't go in just to evangelize and have converts. And that's not what God wants either. He doesn't just want someone who's just all like, yes, God, I believe in you. And then a day later, well, Buddha, you look kind of interesting over there. No. He wants disciples. He wants disciples who will make disciples, people who are invested in a relationship with him and only God. And so Paul knew that. He went in to share the gospel, yes, but he also wanted to share in life itself with these people, because that is a part of the gospel. That is a part, and arguably the most effective way to evangelize. is to live life with someone, to encounter them wherever they're at in their messes, and to toil away with them in the midst of life. And that's what Paul was doing. And so as we move onward to the third pillar, I'm going to go to the verse 9, where he says, "Surely you remember, brothers and sisters, our toil and hardships. We work night and day in order not to be a burden to anyone while we preach the gospel of God to you. You are witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you who believed. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own child." And so the final pillar in every relationship, and then there's a fourth one that's specific to Christian relationship, is that the third one needs to be supportive. Relationships need to be supportive, to have any substance, to have any quality, any good merit to them. People have to support you. And as we look at that, we see that all over in this section right here where he says, "Surely you remember our toils and our hardships. We worked night and day in order not to burden anyone that we preached." He didn't want to just go there and be like, "How about you guys just host me? I'll go in and I only eat like vegan food and I only eat gluten-free food. And so if you could cater your meal to me, that would really help me be more effective in sharing the gospel." No. He went in with the mindset of, I'm going here to work. I'm going here to live life with them. Whatever they're doing, I'm doing it too. Because I want to be a part of their world. I want to be able to encounter them wherever they're at. And as he goes on, he says that we dealt with each other as a father deals with his own child. And that doesn't have to carry a negative context or a negative connotation of like, oh, father deals with his child with a belt. No, it doesn't have to be like disciplinary. But when you think of a father to their child, you think of this father wants to pass on wisdom to his kid. This father wants to support his child and see his child do well. He wants to see his child flourish and prosper in their life. There's no father, at the den, there's no good father alive that wants to see their child doing poorly. Every good parent, every good father wants to see their kid do better than them in their life. They want to see their kid have more success than they did, have a better education than they did, have better relationships than they did, not make the same mistakes that they did, even though they will probably make a lot of the same mistakes since we've all been teenagers here, minus Chanel. And Paul wanted to support these people. He didn't just want to go there, have a check in the box and say, all right, planning a church, now I can add this to the Bible, and everyone's got to remember me forever. No. He went in with the mentality to have personal relationships with these people, to have relationships that would deepen, and relationships where he could support them, and vice versa, that they could support Paul. Relationships aren't one-way streets. And when we're called, and when we're in a good relationship that is supportive, we then get to a place where we start to bear the burdens for people, where we help them achieve their goals, where we want to see them succeed, where we want to strengthen them in the ways that they are weak. And at the core of this is a selfless love, where we start to care more about their well-being than our own, where we start to care and want to see what we can give them, how we can support them more than, well, what can I get out of this relationship? What can I get out of this? It's all like, I'm in a relationship with someone who makes $10 a week and lives somehow in a home that has no electricity. You don't go with the mindset, what can I gain from this person? What am I here to get? But a supportive relationship says, what can I give? How How can I love this person? What do they need in their life? And of course, I say that with wisdom. It's not saying, oh, just give all of your money away to the next friend that you encounter and just ruin your life trying to make theirs better. No, take that with wisdom. And so in this, in quality relationship with these three pillars, we will find people flourishing. We will find people excited. We will find people who are looking forward to the next day, and someone who knows that's something they can rely on. They will be more confident in what they do. You'll see people who become more resilient and self-reliant, ironically. And the final thing, the final pillar that I want to touch on, and this one is ideally one that these three pillars would lead into in a relationship. It doesn't always, and that's okay if it doesn't. But the fourth one is to be faith building. One that builds our faith, one that sharpens who we are in Christ. And we see that at the very last section of 1 Thessalonians, at verse 12, where he says, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory. Yes, we want good relationship. Yes, we want supportive, deepening, personal relationships. Absolutely, that is foundational. But we're not always going to encounter Christians. And that's good. We don't want all of our friends to only be Christians, to only be the same kind of person, to have the same beliefs. We want to encounter people of different beliefs. We want to be able to bring Christ to them and have Christ transform them so that they can be in the best relationship possible, one with God. And assuming that that relationship grows and they come to faith, fantastic. This fourth pillar gets erected and you're able to establish this. Or if you're just in relationship with a Christian friend, someone you know already believes in Christ, then this is a fourth pillar to a relationship. And that is one that is faith building. There's a Proverbs 27:17 is one that embodies that well, and that's very simple. Iron sharpens iron. That's a kind of relationship when you're in one with a Christian that you want. You want someone to be able to talk to you about Christ, someone you want to be able to talk with things that you're grappling with, because we don't suddenly understand everything there is to know about God. Once we become a Christian, there is an eternity's worth of stuff to learn about God, and there is an eternity's worth of stuff for us to understand. And so on this side of heaven, we grapple with things. Things don't always make sense. When we look at Scripture, we hear various voices out in the world saying, well, God is condemning, and he's not. But we hear voices saying like, oh, God is condemning, and he hates you, and he doesn't like what you're doing, this and this, and people feel condemned. And then we hear God is grace, God is love, which he is, and God is love. And we need to filter those. We need to be that voice that can understand Scripture and lead people to understanding God as accurately as possible. And so it builds your faith when you're in a relationship with someone who doesn't break it down. You want someone who will be able to go through these things with you without judgment, without a, oh, you are so stupid for not knowing this already. It's like, duh, don't you have your master's in theology? I thought everybody did. You want someone who is willing to go with you when you have those questions, or if you're both in the same place, someone who you can talk to it about, and you can both look and find stuff and talk about it and figure out, what is God trying to teach us? What is God trying to tell me in my life? And we see this in Hebrews 3, verse 12 through 13, a faith-building relationship, where it says, take care, brethren, lest there should be in any one of you any evil, unbelieving heart falling away from the living God, but encourage one another day after day, as long as it is called today, lest any of you be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. And that is something that we all, as Christians, as humans, as fallible, imperfect people, always, every single day, have to be on guard against is our enemy, our adversary, the one who wants to see us fail, the one who wants to trip us up, wants to see us die, wants to see us suffer. And that's what this fourth pillar is for, to help strengthen one another, to be able to resist our enemy, resist our adversary, so that our hearts are able to resist temptation when it comes our way. Because if you are just left in isolation, human mind, human heart warps very quickly, and we are prone to almost anything. We need to be in relationship. We need to be in a relationship that will fortify us, that will strengthen us, that will encourage us, just as we see in Hebrews, day after day, to encourage one another. It doesn't say to correct, and that's something I know people really like to jump on. It's all like, oh, well, Paul said, speak the truth in love, so that's my free ticket to go around and just correct every single person I see and every behavior I don't like. Well, Paul said, speak the truth in love, so you're doing this wrong, and you're doing that wrong, and then it brings up the scripture of all, like, the person who tries to call out, like, a little speck in someone's eye without seeing, like, the branch in their own. And so we have to take this with humility. Our first calling is to encourage people. And even in relationship, is someone going to take a correction from just some random person they don't know? Absolutely not. We have no influence over someone. But in relationship, in a deep, supportive relationship, when someone trusts you and knows that you know them, they're open to hearing things that they need to hear, to have those hard conversations. Because I'm not saying shy away from them, but I'm not saying go full blast on every single person you meet either. There's a time and place for a correction. If you see someone's all like, oh, they're in a relationship where they're just sleeping together and they're living together, that's not something you want, and that's not something God wants. But meeting them for the first time at church, and they say like, oh yeah, I live with my girlfriend. You'd be like, well, God doesn't want that. And then they'll be like, well, I don't want a relationship with you, I'm out. No, you encounter them where they're at, and when God gives you an opportune time to say those things that they need to hear to live a better life, to live a more Christ-like life, God will give you those opportunities. Just because you're not correcting them doesn't mean you're condoning a lifestyle or condoning a behavior, but you're waiting. Just as God waits with us in our own lives. He's not always saying like, Anthony, you're doing this and this and this and this wrong, even though I know I do countless things wrong. But there are moments in our life where God convicts us. And thank God we don't feel convicted every single day of our life. That would be exhausting to be like, God, what a wretch I am. I'm feeling convicted every day over everything I'm doing. But we get convicted at times, absolutely. But outside of those convicting moments should be encouragement for who God created this person to be. And so those are the four major pillars of quality relationship. And the reality is that we won't have a huge number of these. After we say all of that, we're not going to have 72 huge, deep, supportive, faith-building relationships. And that's okay. Christ set that example, and we even see that for him. When we see that he had the 72 that he sent out to make disciples. When we see the 12 that he had, the apostles that were with him. And even amongst them, he had 3 that he was with, James, John, and Peter, more intimately. We as humans can only sustain so many quality, deep relationships, and that's okay. We are not a failure for only having so many relationships. But the relationships we do have, invest in them. Put your time into them. Put intentionality towards them. Because when we see people who are surrounded by bad relationships, and I see that all the time, see people who are relationships that they're not supportive, that they have no depth to them, that they are just superficial, but hey, we have a a commonality where it's like we both like to smoke weed or something. We see people becoming lesser versions of themselves. We see people getting hollowed out from the inside and becoming fragile. And for what I see out there, people are starving for good relationship. No matter who they are, whether they be a young person, they could be a shut-in, they could be someone who's disabled, they could be someone who's elderly, it could be someone who is socially inept, it could be someone who's homeless, it could be someone who is hard on their luck and just having a really bad time financially. People are starving for good quality relationship out there. And so the power of relationship is the power to change lives. And this isn't me saying we need to go on a Billy Graham crusade, because even Billy Graham did not have a relationship with those tens of thousands that he preached to. Maybe one or two in the crowd he had a relationship, but he had zero relationship with those people. And they had no relationship with him. And the sad reality for a lot of those people is that they turned away from the faith because they had no support around them. They were very touched by the moving music and the sermon he gave. I'm not saying having a crusade is bad, but there was no relationship behind it. And so it was a superficial conversion that could be turned back easily because there was no relationship behind it to support it and to have it be mended together and made whole. And so for all of us here, the four pillars were to have a real, personal relationship, to have one that is deepening, and not just deep, it is always growing, to one that is supportive of one another, and one that is faith-building, because when people are in good relationship, when people have people that love them, people that support them, people that are for them in their life, you see transformation unlike anything other. You see people's lives being enriched, and you see people being emboldened, being empowered, being strengthened to go out and be the person that God created them to be. Amen? Let's pray. Father, Son, Spirit, we just come before you this afternoon. Thank you so much for who you are, the God of relationship, of all relationship. God, we thank you that you call us to just that with you. For all of us, no matter where we're at in our messy lives, you want a relationship with us. More than us just saying, I believe in you, God. You want us to encounter you, the living, loving, grace-filled God that you are. You want us to be able to encounter you and have a deep, meaningful, life-changing relationship with you. And God, we thank you so much that you offer that to all of us so freely and so willingly. Every opportunity you get, you are trying to tell us that you love us, that you have something more for us, that there is grace for you, for us. And God, we thank you for that. We thank you that you speak to us even though most of the time our ears are closed or they're just being preoccupied by whatever happens in this world. We thank you that you have so much patience and so much grace and so much love for us, that you will do this for an eternity. You will and have pursued us for an eternity, and you will always pursue us to the ends of the earth. We thank you so much, God, for the fact that you've given us the capacity to be in relationship, and for what relationship does to us when there's one of substance and quality. I pray for everyone here in their lives, wherever they're at, whoever they know, that they're able to take time out of their week and spend time in relationship with their brothers and sisters. We thank you, God, for who you are. We thank you for who you've made all of us individually to be. And we just lift everyone up here to you. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.